Who Watches the Rewatchers, a Buffy rewatch podcast. Hey, this is Alan, and before we get started today, I just wanted to let you know that the internet was a little brutal to us on this one, so every once in a while I'm going to break in and re-record a little bit of whatever was said using this microphone so that you can hear it clearly. Hopefully that won't interrupt. I'll try to make it so that it doesn't interrupt the flow of the podcast very much. But I have found that this happens to us every once in a while, and hopefully it won't get too distracting.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to Who Watches the Rewatchers, where we rewatch the Buffy the Vampire Slayer series and muse on it, reflect on it, get a bit nostalgic. With me, as always, is my friend Alan, and we're going to talk about the third episode today, Witches, or The Witch. It's called The Witch, isn't that right?
The Witch, yes.
The Witch.
Exactly. And this is the first episode out of 3 where we're fighting a human and not a vampire. I also think it's the first episode where we're getting a hint as to what the show's larger intention will be.
Okay, how is that?
You know, which it's the first episode where the metaphor for life as a teenager is really the driving point.
Yeah, you can totally see that. Dealing with it, social issues at school. Of course, this is the cold open as Giles with his back turned and turning around and frustrated in the library, and you can't do it. You just absolutely can't do it. And he's protesting, and you wonder,
Yeah, he's protesting. She's going to join a cult. You joined a cult.
Join a cult. You think it's uber serious, and then he turns around, and the reveal is Buffy Summers in a generic cheerleader outfit.
Yes. But you don't like the colors?
Oh, it's just, I don't know. It's going back to Buffy's. We know this, that Buffy used to be in cheer, and she's active, had an active social life in her former school. I think this is her trying to get some semblance of normalcy back in her life. And Giles, of course, is upset because, not because of cheerleading per se, but because she's got duties as the Slayer. And so her duties,
that's right,
push up against her social life. And so it's an episode she's going to try out for the cheerleading team.
So when she gets to the way to the tryouts, we have a scene with Xander and Willow in the hallway where Xander talks about the idea that he is interested in Buffy romantically, and he's going to try to give her a present and admit to his feelings for her. And he's asking for Willow's advice.
Yes, and Willow is, I think at this point, did they play on that she's been in love with Xander since they were kids? Is that kind of there in the subtext?
Yeah, they mentioned it in one of the earlier 2 episodes that they used to date, and then Xander broke the crayons from home or something. I don't remember the exact line. The implication was that they were together when they were in kindergarten.
So he thinks he's talking to his buddy, and she's got mixed feelings, and Xander wants to give her this ill-advised piece of jewelry, a bracelet that says something about forever, always on it, and he's got to stand up and finally tell Buffy Summers how he feels. Which, watching this back, makes me really, I'm heartened by how Buffy treats him. I mean, you can feel the angst. He's very awkward, but I just was heartened. She was kind of cool with him. She wound him, as is, teenage kids don't know how to behave in situations like that. But she was, anyway, it's a nice present, right? To the oddest cheerleading practice ever, in my opinion, because it's just like kids sitting around watching from school as Xander and Willow watch, and they introduce another character. Of course, Cordelia's on the scene, but they introduce another character who's a part of cheerleading, and she's an interesting character. Her name's Amy, correct?
Yes, her name's Amy, and she also wants to try out for the cheerleading team. There's another cheerleader who's trying out, and someone says, Cordelia says, what does she think? She's a Laker girl. And Willow says, I heard the Lakers turned her down, or she turned down the Lakers or something.
Which I think is funny because it wasn't the actress who played Charisma Carpenter, who played Cordelia. Wasn't she like a Charger girl in real life?
I don't know. That's actually an interesting tidbit that I don't think I knew. That's fantastic.
I think it's true. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah. And the girl Amber who turned down the Lakers, she's got this really Everyone's really impressed with her dance. But
And she's on fire.
yeah, she's on fire, and then, something really is going on. Everyone starts to notice certain smoke and spontaneous combustion happens. It's 40
Right.
sort of things. And I do remember back in the 90s, spontaneous combustion being something talked about on all those weird shows, right? It was probably something to talk about. Is this a real phenomenon or not? But that's the introduction to the show. What the problem of the day is. Something is going on at cheerleading practice, and
Right.
and thrown in the mix. Also, you get the sense that this other character that's newly introduced, Amy, whose mom trains with her 3 hours before school and 3 hours after school. That something's not quite right with her. But she has been a longtime friend of Willow, and you also get the sense that she used to weigh more weight or be heavier, because Willow says, "You lost weight," and she said, "I had to." And all those things make you feel like something's weird going on at home, which is, I think, appropriate for a show about teen life.
At that point, Buffy and Amy have tried out for this thing.
The girl who's on fire, literally, needs to be rescued by Buffy, who puts out the fire.
She would have been in worse shape if Buffy hadn't been there to save her. And so then, of course, Giles starts talking about the amazing experience of living on the Hellmouth, and that these kinds of things are going to happen. And everyone just sort of looks at him like he's a crazy person for being excited about the variety of problems they're going to face.
Yes, he's rather nerdy about that.
So then Buffy goes home and sees her mom, and she mentions to her mother that she's trying out for cheerleading practice, and or she was trying out.
And Buffy's mom has no memory of what Buffy was trying out for.
And her mom is obviously consumed with her own life.
And the dialogue in this particular scene was really convicting. I mean, the idea that Buffy's mom is so consumed with her own life that she is completely oblivious to what her daughter's going through reminded me of times in my own life when I'm not as on top of it as I need to be. Anyway, Buffy says something to her mom to the effect of how Amy's mom practices with her for hours after school. And Buffy's mom says,
"Sounds like Amy's mom doesn't have a whole lot to do." And, I'm a pretty busy fellow, and sometimes I feel like I don't. I know this isn't true because I do spend enough time with my kid, but sometimes I feel like I don't. And so there's that. And then later on in the episode, just to sort of finish the business about me feeling convicted, there's a line later in the episode where Buffy says something to the effect of, "A lot of times parents want you to be a carbon copy of them, and if you're not, they wig." I probably do that to my kid without meaning to,
Dude, yeah.
So did any of that connect with you?
No, not with my parents per se. But I did see other kids when I was growing up, especially, if a dad or mom was really, really, really into something, they tried to, push that into their kid. And with my kids, it feels like everything that I want them to do, they hate. So, or they turn their nose at. So I try to find another way to introduce things to them. So yeah, I mean, I know that typical parental move, but if I told my kids, "Oh, I really want you to be in cheerleading," they would all of a sudden hate cheerleading. I think it's got to be their idea.
So Willow starts talking about the Slayerettes. That name doesn't stick with the group. They end up calling themselves the Scoobies. But Spike takes on the name the Slayerettes later in the series as sort of a way to make fun of them. So Willow and Xander and Giles are basically trying to figure out who's making trouble for the cheerleaders.
Because what happens is Amy and Buffy, we find out, are alternates, meaning they didn't make the team, but they're like the ones who are going to be called up if someone gets kicked off the team. And the first person to get kicked off the team is, of course, Cordelia.
No, I said, no, we see a scene where it cuts to a dungeon-like sort of space, and there's a cauldron brewing, there's a little doll, and you find out it's Cordelia, and something's
Yes.
right. So yeah, and so there's a spell put on Cordelia. That's where the show tips off the fact that we're dealing with some sort of magical powers. And it's sort of Barbie meets voodoo, or popular conception with voodoo. And these little Barbie dolls are hanging on fish hooks. And
Yes.
they wrap some around her eyes because Cordelia's going to go blind during driver's ed, creating a very fun scene to shoot.
Yeah, so Cordelia goes blind while she's trying to have her driver's test, which we all assume is true of most student drivers at some point.
And then, of course, Buffy gets called up for her cheerleading audition, and the spell that's being cast to try to get Buffy off of the cheerleading squad has a different effect on her. It makes her appear to be intoxicated.
Mm.
And we see this because it starts off with her singing Macho Man. And then when she gets to the school to actually begin cheering, her Slayer strength is in full effect, and she ends up throwing people around horribly.
And eventually she gets cut from the team, and that's when Amy gets on the team. But in this moment is the part that you're talking about where she was very kind, where Buffy was very kind to Xander, because even though she's intoxicated, he says something to Xander to the effect of, Xander, you're one of the girls, which is ironic because he just finished telling Willow she's one of the guys.
Right. Yeah. There's a dagger to the heart in both ways.
So that's the point where Giles really gets involved and knows that he needs to break whatever spell is on Buffy. And so they at this point they're pretty confident that Amy has something to do with it. And so Giles marches Buffy down to Amy's house to have a conversation with Amy's mom. And when they go in and Giles starts berating Amy's mother, talking about all the things that Amy's clearly involved with, Buffy makes the connection that they're not talking to Amy's mom. They're talking to Amy.
Yeah, we have a real parent trap, or whatever it's called, a big switch of Amy's mom, who was Catherine the Great, who was this great cheerleader, supposedly, wanted to relive her glory days through her daughter. And she's also happened to be a witch who did a spell to live in Amy's body. And I take it maybe Amy's body was not up to the cheerleading, which is the reason why Amy wasn't the best or something. But she takes over and makes Amy be her middle-aged body, and is spiritually abusing her, I guess you might say. Natural abuse.
One of the funniest things in the lead up to this that I caught was that when Amy, who's actually Amy's mom, Catherine the Great, is telling Buffy about her mother, she's talking about her mother in these grandiose terms. Her mother did all these things. Her husband left her, and she was still able to do all these wonderful things. She was able to buy me everything that I wanted, and so on and so forth.
Mom was definitely a body shamer.
Oh yes, unquestionably. So after that, Buffy, Giles, and the Slayerettes
try to find a way to break the spell.
Willow gets involved in sort of a sciencey way. I felt like there was a scene there to try to establish her as being like the science nerd, because she knew what the chemical compounds that were being referenced were. But basically, they figure out that they're going to need to break the spell in some way. They start trying to break the spell on Amy so that Amy can go back to her own body. But then Catherine attacks, and in the process of this attack, Catherine casts a spell to basically do away with the person she's casting the spell on forever. Buffy grabs a mirror. The mirror reflects the spell back to Catherine, and Catherine ends up trapped in a cheerleading trophy for the rest of time. And that event is actually referenced in some later episodes.
Yeah, and that's the big reveal at the end. So Catherine's gonzo. There's not really she's just disappeared for a while until later when Amy and Buffy are looking at the trophy case where the old trophy was won, and you can hear in a doom sort of way Catherine's body or soul is in the trophy. The way that's the whole story was told made me really feel like it just really made me feel like an X-File creature episode. They end with an open door where they could revisit the story anytime they wanted, but it was a spooky, terrible thing that kind of a one-off. However, they kind of, they bring in some stuff that plays out later, like the Slayerettes. That becomes a Spike thing. But Willow starts doesn't Willow in her sciencey way kind of dabble in a little magic?
Yeah, a little bit, but it was really Giles that does the magic in this particular episode. I don't think that they were trying to push Willow in the magic direction yet at this point. I think that they were really trying to like keep her being the science nerd, the computer nerd. I think that they have saved this idea that she's eventually going to be interacting with magic. I don't think that they really deal with that until early in the second season.
Yeah, I mean, dealing with the magic is kind of the supernatural kind of sciencey bit. I mean, there's a connection between.
Yeah,
but definitely, they left enough seeds for them to grow in a lot of different ways that they would want to go, including bringing the character Jamie back. When I watched this episode, I thought about how in later seasons and episodes they develop a kind of fuller picture of witchcraft in the witch world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here, I don't know that they had that in mind. I mean, they have this very shamanic sort of, cauldron-y kind of spell. They pulled it from the cauldron of medieval Grimm's fairy tale stories and witches in the forest. You look at a lot of the old tropes of witches, and there's a lot of belief that they're fueled by anti-Semitism with the way in which witches were described. But the cauldron, probably coming from cookery of the time. But you have that kind of. When you look at the Grimm's fairy tales, there are all these fairy tales collected. There's several different but several different attempts to collect these old stories. Charles Perrault and the Grimm's brothers do it in France and Germany, and oftentimes these witches were in the forest, because you think back in the day, the forest was both sometimes a sign of the divinities, sometimes a sign of evil and badness, because bad guys went and hid out in the forest to get away from the law. You think Sherwood Forest and Robin Hood, that's where they went out to hide. So out there's danger, and that's probably where the witches were, the people who needed to dwell in secret. And you have that, and then so you got the cauldron, you got those old tropes that are coming back to mind, and then you got, like I said, the Barbies on fish hooks, which is sort of what people think about when they think of voodoo dolls. Like that's what voodoo dolls are, truly, but that's a question that these are representations of people, and that you can take this thing, this object that represents someone else, and it affect them in real life. So because they're entertaining magic, although they haven't defined it in any way, the kind of world that's created in Buffy is what the philosopher Charles Taylor calls it, the forest world, where things can interact with things and not just people.
Love it.
But, the modern age is we have we call it the buffered self, where it's me. There's a hard line between me and anything else.
In the pre-modern age, things were porous,
and so spirits and things can interact and engage.
So this episode opens up the idea that a Slayer can interact with witches.
It seems like witches are much more a threat than vampires.
Vampires. Yeah. Totally agreed. Well, along that same line, part of the way that I think that they pulled the idea that Catherine needed to be a witch from the modern world is that when she was getting divorced, her husband said she's a witch, which I think is sort of a reaction that people have when those kinds of relationships are ending. One of the things that I think is particularly genius about this episode is just how many ways they were driving home that metaphor. Okay, so what is a witch in current society? A witch is a woman who is unpleasant to be around, and so they kept that idea intact throughout the whole thing. But I love what you're saying about what they're pulling from in terms of folklore and how they're pushing the idea home visually. It's pretty well known that this first season of Buffy had like next to zero budget, but how are you going to communicate that this supernatural thing is occurring visually when you have like next to no money, you know? And so now we're thinking about cauldrons and voodoo dolls and Barbie dolls as voodoo dolls and everything else, and I think that that's just genius as well.
Yeah, I'm always. This is a big nerd in me, but I'm always fascinated by how witches are portrayed. From European folklore to where Buffy will go with witchcraft to, the modern contemporary new religious movement of Wicca. And I think almost certainly it's the case that whenever we're painting witchcraft in a bad light, it's not a stereotype, but it's I think a monster that has been created out of images and symbols to reflect a deeper concern. But I remember going to this place called Common Ground grocery store back from where my wife and I are from, and it was a health food store, and it was a small little independent shop in a downtown space, so it wasn't like a strip mall. So it was kind of you walked in, and there was this big book, and you opened it up, and you kind of went through it about the kind of whatever symptoms or what ailed you, and then it would tell you what was good for you, like what vitamin supplements, but then like what natural organic foods, and then later, when you think about the Magic Box store, the store that they'll run here in Buffy, where they have all their supernatural supplies, or you think about the library, they pull these big books and go through it, and I would look around and I would see these people shopping and talking to the people who work there about like what herbs and remedies would help. And certainly there is something about herbalism and herbalistic traditions that we associate with the shamans and what are sometimes called witch doctors. They have no nefarious. They're just pre-modern healthcare givers. But I stood in that store with my wife. And I go, this is a contemporary witch store. It's like a coven. It's like a witch home.
Right.
Fascinated with sure. It's how it made me feel based on all these images through pop culture over time, and how consulting these people with these secret knowledge or this ancient knowledge that undermines contemporary wisdom goes outside of the norm, right?
Yep.
So I think it's interesting because even though I don't think any of that is intended necessarily in this episode, I think they get more metaphysical and mythical later. I think you can't help but pull those things in when you're pulling on traditions. You touch one tradition, it has a little bit of baggage it brings with it.
This episode, to your point, does they reference it a million times. Not only does Amy come back, and not only do they reference the trophy in the display case a number of times, but the whole the love triangle with Willow and Xander and Buffy is referenced for the next few years. It isn't until I think somewhere in the middle of season 4 when I think a lot of that goes away.
Yeah. You said that you felt a little convicted about the parent and the child situation, and in a lot of ways, I think that feeling can apply to Giles, who really becomes a father figure to Buffy, who
yes, very much
is expecting something out of her that was unrealistic or unreasonable, that she wouldn't be interested in her social life, wouldn't be interested in cheerleading or whatever she is interested in. And I think that's only kind of gotten worse since 1996 when I was filmed, and it came out in 97. After the parent expectation of children has gotten much worse. I think expectation of travel sports and doing what you can to get ahead for college applications.
Yes.
I mean, it's gotten so exalted. Their free time, I think, for kids has just gone down. Unstructured social play has definitely gone down. Most unstructured social play is online, which I think is dangerous. Jonathan Haidt's new work on that really talks about that. It's called The Anxious Generation. But I mean, in his book, he says that today's parents are, overly protective in places they shouldn't be, and underprotective places they should. Meaning that we protect our kids from falling and scraping their knee or playing in the neighborhood without our supervision. We overprotect there, where they actually develop and grow. Whereas in online spaces, we underprotect them, and really modify them, turning them into consumers, make them addicted to scrolling, body image issues, predators, all that stuff.
Oh my gosh!
But I know so many parents who are on their kids, and so much so, and as you are a professor, we talked about this once before about parents calling college professors about their kids' grades, making sure their kids are successful. I can feel that in Giles, wanting Buffy to live up to something that she's only, however, 15, 16 years. I mean, she's 16 at this season. I don't
remember her age. I just know that I know she's a sophomore. That's all I know.
Yeah, she's a sophomore. So, of course, she's going to want to have fun and do things. That's
exactly right. That's exactly right. And meanwhile, what Buffy says of Giles is that he's way too overprotective, and he needs a life. And if he weren't so old, she would suggest he get a girlfriend. And at this point, I think he's about your age.
I know. I look back at Anthony Stewart Head, and he was, because his hairline was a little up and he had the glasses, but I thought it was an old guy. Now I look
right.
Man, he looked great.
Exactly. I'm having the exact same experience. There's a meme that I share every year when it comes up on my Facebook feed. It's like a 2-panel one where Giles is saying to Buffy, "I'm not supposed to have a social life," and Buffy says, "No, you're old and it's gross." And
I remember that.
And I looked it up, and when Giles has this conversation with Buffy, Anthony Stewart Head is 44 years old.
But it is, you're going to start, that theme starts to grow, which it's a theme I appreciate, where she does have a burden, whether or not she's a young person or not. And that burden,
yes,
leadership is always a burden.
And we feel that pretty forcefully.
I really, my eldest daughter is 11 years old now. She's almost 12. And when she started wanting to dress up more as a very little one, and like Halloween costumes and things, and we're a big Halloween family, so Halloween costumes are kind of just more play costumes in their room. She was, I remember looking for a mix of costume and also something to watch on TV or a movie that was like that. I remember myself thinking I wanted to see a female hero.
And a female hero is hard to find.
And I did not think Buffy was appropriate time for her. And now I'm trying to get her to watch it. Of course, if I want her to watch it, now it's dumb. But like I said before. But sometimes the female heroes were were sexualized, or the content was too much. And so I would talk about Buffy in that regard, like wanting her to see it, because I remember thinking, even as a teenager when it was coming out, that it was completely different. Female, like, hero who was the leader. And, it didn't threaten my masculinity; it inspired me. And in fact, I identify with her, and she's not a man. So I think it gets really well done as they put those pressures on her later on when she gets a little mature. So, definitely. You're definitely seeing in these early episodes the lack of budget and I can see some rawness of the acting. Like, I think Nicholas Brendan really wasn't trained in acting. I think he was like a college baseball player. He's just a little bit more quirky. He kind of smoothed out a little bit. I think Giles is pretty, I think he's pretty solid. But
he's pretty solid.
You see some growth. I think at this point, Sarah Michelle Gellar had been in soap operas, right?
That's right.
I remember.
No, I think I listened to one of the director commentaries, and Wheaton was talking specifically about this goes back to our previous episode, when she was in the principal's office and Flutie was, ripping up and then taping back together her record. They play that almost entire scene on Sarah's reactions as opposed to showing you a lot of what Flutie's face while he's talking. And that's specifically because they realized in that moment what a tremendous actress they had in her. But to your point, I think she is still trying to find her way and figure things out, especially with this role.
Yeah. So I think that we could get into a whole lot of themes if we wanted to about abuse, but I think it's pretty implied. And again, it gives that sense that we're on kind of a monster of the week, but they do pull back on it and come back to it. So I've already previewed what's coming up next, and it's an early favorite of mine to see Xander fall over himself for a teacher.
Oh yeah, awesome. So that's up next week. Excellent.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on this one for you, Alan?
No, like I said before, the big thing that I really love about this particular episode is it's the first time we've really seen where Buffy's going to go, which is the idea of taking typical high school problems and personifying them through the Monster of the Week concept. This idea that parents put all of their hopes into their own children, and sort of how that is reflected and looked at from all the other perspectives. I think that was just as good of an introduction to this idea as it could be.
Yeah, talk about the three ailments that happen to people: burning on fire. I think about feeling like on fire, feeling anger, feeling or feeling uncontrollable fire, blindness, clueless, or even drunk, right? Or inebriated.
Yep.
And completely out of control. So I think that's really hitting those in very metaphorical way. So yeah, all right, my friend. Well, until next time.